friends, I'm back. I'm back again and doing the same thing as in the last video, just filling my sketchbook spread. I thought I could show my process once again, but with slightly different subjects. So I decided to draw this lady because in the reference she looked really interesting, and the position and the pose really drew me to what she looks like. And then also all the accessories and the glasses. I never paint or draw glasses, and it's always a challenge, so I thought, why not? And yeah, then I went in with the same techniques, did the brush pen. Now I'm colouring in with some watercolours, still carrying on with the watercolours. I thought I could experiment some more and see what else I can do, because I never used them, and now I'm kind of obsessed again. And then I also started drawing a heron, and then I thought that's quite boring, I'll give him a friend. I drew another heron, and yeah, I combined the two. I don't know why. And then I also decided to make them really drippy, just for the aesthetics, probably. Nothing too... There was no purpose. And then I'm using the same brush pen, or a different one. Probably a different one. That's why I'm showing it. But this is the Pentel brush pen, and it's really good. The tip, the actual nib of it is really thin, so you can get really, really thin lines. It's really cool. I then needed to add some more watercolour to the actual palette that I'm using. This palette is the only one that I use when I use the watercolours, and I leave the remaining paints on it always. It's like that for me with any paint. So like I have multiple paint palettes with dried up paint on it already, so I can just come back in and like pick it back up. Like my gouache palettes, I believe I have 2, and I just leave paint on there and just go back in. But yeah, I started off the herons painting them with some reds and yellows, and I thought with the orangey colours it kind of fits to add the blue, and I really loved the way that the blue and the orange look together. The contrast is just so pleasing to my eye. Again, the brush really helps with the textures, hence why the herons have so many different like strokey textures like fur. Obviously they don't have fur, but yeah, I drew a couple of things there. There's a tree with some berries like always, and I also did a moth and some mushrooms. I then taped up the right side of the sketchbook and decided to draw a kitty cat once again. I really like cats, so why not? And I used a reference for this, and I decided, as I started drawing along, because I just started out with a sketch, I needed the rough pose of the cat, and then I went from there. I added some little ear twirls, and then I wanted a really nice fluid dynamic shape of the cat, and I think I did pretty well. So here's just the sketching process. I decided to give him a super long tail. In the reference, the tail goes down, and because obviously I taped up the page, I decided to bring that tail up and twirl around, and I feel like it kind of frames the whole page itself. So yeah. I gave him some little horns, and then as I was drawing and sketching, a couple of those lines gave me like flame textures, so I decided to give him a pattern. And obviously some cats have a pattern, so I thought, why not give him a flame one? And then I carried that around the tail and the face and everything else. So I also had left a few marks from the watercolor on the actual page, so the only way to get them off is by using a brush and some water and then like wiping it away. This is the brand of rainbow pencils I use, and they're really, really soft, but because they are so soft, I have to sharpen them constantly. But I really enjoy the way that the rainbow pencil looks. Here's the Winsor & Newton watercolors that I keep using. I decided to go in with the yellow paint, like a yellowy orangey paint for the actual cat. And if I'm honest, I started this painting with really, really high hopes, and when I started adding the colours and the watercolours into the sketch, I didn't know what colours to go and do. So I used some of these alcohol markers, and I kind of laid out a few colours, and I still wasn't sure, so I used the alcohol markers in the actual painting, and I wanted to see if I can bring in some more textures into the actual piece, because I was just struggling a lot. I didn't know what direction to go in. I think I overcomplicated it, and at some parts I really didn't want to go back in and finish it. I was holding 3 markers at once and I was just trying to blend out the sketch, but as you can see, I gave up with that. I didn't carry that onto the top half, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a distraction, add some blue into the background, because I know that blue and orange go well together, so I thought, why not? I then started painting the little moth, and green and pink go well together, so I thought, might as well. I've got the magenta, I've got the nice leafy greens, and yeah, and it actually turned out to be one of my favourite things on the actual spread. I didn't do anything complicated for the mushrooms. I literally just laid in very rough coloured shapes, and that's it. For the tree, I started off with a very leafy green. I didn't want it to be too distracting, but I also wanted to bring in and kind of match the moth, because there's not that many greens in the actual spread. I then went back in with the rainbow pencil to define and give the tree some shapes and textures. I then also added in some alcohol marker into the berries and some crosses to indicate that they are indeed some berries. And then I wanted to, once the moth dried, I started adding in some more textures, and using a very thin, like a liner brush, I started bringing in, because moths are usually very furry, so I wanted to convey that thought. This pink that I'm using for the little outlines is actually alcohol marker that I mixed with water. So the way I did that was I literally just opened a marker and I scribbled some on the palette, and then I added some water to it to water it down, and it really worked, because the magenta that I've got on my palette, it wasn't doing what I wanted it to do, so I decided to improvise. I then started on the line work for the cat. Again, I didn't know whether to do an outline or not, or just carry on painting, but I was stuck. I was really stuck at this point, and I thought, we'll see what happens when I start outlining it, whether it's going to ruin it or going to make it better. But there were so many doubts in my head, and I was just really scared of messing it up, because sometimes when I have this really great idea in my head and I can't put it to paper, it really frustrates me and just shows that I've got such a long way to go still to be able to show exactly what's in my head on paper. And sometimes that's really difficult, and it can get really annoying and frustrating. You try and do art and make ideas and things like that, it's still really difficult to piece them together sometimes. I use these Pentel Touch markers. They have a really flexible nib, so it's really easy to make this fur texture, and yeah. I decided to bring in some more darkness into the sketch, and I went back in with the rainbow pencil. And then onto the flames. So this was nerve-wracking because I did not know what color to do the flames either. Like, there was so many colors going on already, not just in this piece but also the whole spread, so I didn't want to make it like really crazy. So I was like, okay, I could do the flame pattern like a brownish color, like a darker color, but then I was like, would that muddy the actual piece? So I decided with the red. Then I had a great idea to just try and experiment. So I was like, this is looking so flat and I don't like the way that it's looking. So I decided to go rogue, and I started adding piece by piece a really nice blue color, and to my surprise the Pentel Touch started blending in with that color, and it created such a nice pattern, and I started to love this piece again. Adding these textures and these shadows and making it more visually interesting just made me want to continue drawing this piece more. The tail, I was still kind of struggling with the piece, so I decided to remove the tape, see what it looks like, see what I can do, and I decided to elongate the tail off of the square, and I think that was a really good call. I added the red Pentel Touch in the background of the tail. And then I started going back into it the same way I did with the body, but I used a lot more darker blue, and it's mixing in with that red, and it's like making this brown and violety purpley color, and I really enjoy the way that it's turning out. This was such a pleasing part to paint, the way that those colours intertwine with each other and create these patterns. The watercolour just amazes me every single time I use it. This tail bit as well, it was so nice to paint, seeing the blues and the pinks and the purples coming through, and the textures that the Pentel pen left is so nice. And then I started adding in the yellow for the flames, and it was just mixing in, and I love the greens and I love the blues and all of those colors coming through. It turned out to be so cool. So at this point, I started to think maybe this is still salvageable. Maybe I can still make it look nice. I started adding in these fur textures with this tiny little liner brush into most of the body. And this is where I was like, okay, this is looking really cool. I'm really loving the way that it's coming out. So what I usually do is I take a Posca pen and I very aggressively slam it down on the back of a little palette for whiskers and any white highlights that I need. And I use this for gouache and watercolor now as well, or anything else that I'm doing that I need a little highlight, little dot, little whisker or anything like that. It's the easiest thing to get, and it's the easiest way of showing highlights because it dries exactly the way that you put it down. So this was the end for my kitty cat. The whiskers and the highlights is usually where the piece ends. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm still getting my grounds and seeing what I can do and the way that I speak, and all of this is super new to me, so I hope you really enjoyed this and hope to see you in the next one. Bye!